My girlfriend said she wanted other men, called me a failure after months of me supporting her. So I thought everything through, packed up and left, changed my life, and made sure she could be with other men just like she wanted. But days later, she was at my door on her knees, crying. Hey Reddit, my name is Jake, and I'm 31 years old. I work as a plumbing contractor in the Tampa area, handling everything from water heater installations to fixing broken pipes and complete bathroom remodels. It's honest work, but after spending my days dealing with homeowners who think they know plumbing better than someone who's been doing this for over a decade, all I really want when I get home is a quiet evening and a cold beer. Madison is my ex-fiancée. Well, she's 27 and pretty much my total opposite in every way imaginable. She's built a career as an influencer with around 85,000 followers on Instagram. Her content mostly consists of outfit posts, smoothie runs, and those day-in-my-life videos where nothing particularly meaningful happens. But somehow they still manage to rack up thousands of views and dozens of comments from her devoted followers. Most weekends, Madison would be off at various influencer events, taking carefully staged photos with other content creators while they all pretended to sip protein shakes and talked about absolutely nothing meaningful. It was a world I never really understood, but I respected that it was her career and tried to be supportive, even when it felt completely foreign to me. We had been together for 2 years total. She moved in with me after about 6 months when her lease was up, mainly because she was completely broke at the time and couldn't afford to renew on her own, despite the financial struggles that came with her inconsistent influencer income. Our relationship felt solid and genuine. I proposed to her 5 months ago during a quiet weekend getaway. Nothing fancy or over the top, just the two of us at this charming beach house near Clearwater that I'd found on Airbnb for a reasonable price. When I got down on one knee, she said yes immediately and started crying. The whole moment actually felt really genuine and authentic, which meant everything to me. But almost immediately after she said yes, Madison started planning this elaborate wedding that has been eating up my savings ever since. There was the venue deposit, her dress which somehow cost more than my monthly truck payment, the caterer, photographer, flowers, and all the other wedding expenses that seem to multiply endlessly. I've been covering most of these costs since her influencer income is incredibly hit or miss. Some months she makes decent money, while other months she brings in practically nothing. Our wedding was supposed to be in 6 months, and honestly, despite all the financial stress and planning chaos, I was actually looking forward to it. I loved Madison and wanted to build a life with her, even if her career path was something I didn't fully understand. Then last Monday happened, and everything changed completely. It was a typical Monday evening, and I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone while Madison was next to me, completely absorbed in editing some video on her laptop. She had her headphones in and was totally focused on whatever content she was putting together for her next post. I ended up on Instagram somehow. I don't even remember exactly how I got there since I barely used the platform anyway. I noticed that Madison had posted a new selfie maybe an hour earlier. It was typical Madison content, perfect lighting, flawless angle, and some caption about embracing your authentic self, or some other buzzword nonsense that influencers love to use. Nothing seemed unusual about the post itself, just another addition to her carefully curated feed. But then, like an idiot, I started reading through the comments. Most of them were the usual supportive messages from her followers, but one particular comment caught my eye. Some guy named Tyler_Fitness22 had written, "Are you taken?" It was pretty standard thirsty behavior. The kind of comment that gets posted on every attractive woman's photos by guys shooting their shot. I was about to scroll past it without giving it much thought when I saw that Madison had actually replied to this guy. My stomach dropped when I read her response. Keeping my options open, complete with a kissy face emoji. I stared at that comment for what felt like a full minute, reading it over and over again to make sure I wasn't seeing things wrong. My fiancée, the woman wearing my engagement ring, had just told a complete stranger that she was keeping her options open, and she'd added a flirty emoji to make sure he got the message. I looked over at Madison, who was still completely absorbed in her video editing, totally unaware that I was having an internal crisis just 2 feet away from her. The engagement ring that I'd saved for months to buy was sitting on her nightstand, while she was actively telling the internet that she was available. Maybe I was overthinking the whole thing, I tried to tell myself. Maybe it was some kind of joke that I didn't understand. Or one of those influencer strategies where you say provocative things just to drive engagement, even if they don't actually mean anything real. But the more I stared at that comment, the less it looked like a joke to me. It seemed pretty straightforward. A guy asked if she was available, and she told him she was keeping her options open. I couldn't sleep after discovering that comment. I just kept thinking about how casually she must have typed that response. How it was probably the most natural thing in the world for her to tell random men online that they might have a shot with her. And she did all of this while her fiancé was lying right next to her in the same bed. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. This wasn't some abstract social media strategy or harmless online flirtation. This was my fiancé actively encouraging other men to think they had a chance with her while she was wearing my ring and planning our wedding. She was literally lying next to me while telling other guys she was available. As I lay there unable to sleep, I started thinking about other things too. How Madison never really posted about being engaged, unless it was sponsored content with wedding vendors. How she would get flirty comments from guys all the time and never shut them down, or mention that she was in a committed relationship. How whenever I brought up anything about her social media behavior that made me uncomfortable, she would act like I was being controlling or didn't understand her career. But this felt fundamentally different from those previous incidents. This wasn't about me not understanding her career or being controlling about her professional choices. This was about basic respect and boundaries in our relationship. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this probably wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I just hadn't been paying close enough attention before. By morning, I knew I had to say something about what I'd seen. This wasn't the kind of thing I could just ignore and hope it would go away on its own. We were supposed to get married in 6 months, and if we couldn't have honest conversations about boundaries and mutual respect now, what was the point of even going through with the wedding? I spent most of my workday that Tuesday thinking about how to bring up the Instagram comment situation without starting a huge fight. I was working on this bathroom renovation project in Brandon, trying to focus on getting the toilet properly leveled. But my mind kept drifting back to that comment and what it meant about how Madison actually viewed our relationship. Finally, around lunch break, I couldn't take it anymore. The uncertainty was eating me alive, so I decided to call my best friend Connor. We've known each other since high school, and he's one of those refreshingly honest, straight-shooter types who will tell you exactly what he thinks whether you want to hear it or not. Quick question for you, I said when he picked up the phone. If your girlfriend posted something on Instagram and some random dude asked if she was taken, what would be a normal response? Probably yes, or happily taken, or just ignoring the comment completely, Connor replied without hesitation. Why are you asking? I read him Madison's comment word for word, including the kissy face emoji. There was complete silence on the other end of the line for what felt like 10 seconds. Bro, what the hell? He finally said. That's seriously messed up. Am I being too sensitive about this? I asked, desperately hoping he might offer some perspective that would make me feel less crazy. She's always saying stuff online that doesn't really mean anything in real life. Nah, man, that's completely messed up, Connor said firmly. That's not something someone who's engaged says to another guy, even if it's supposedly just for likes or whatever social media bullshit. That's actively encouraging random dudes to think they have a legitimate shot with her. Hearing Connor confirm what I already knew in my gut hit me hard. This wasn't normal behavior for someone in a committed relationship, let alone someone who was supposedly planning to marry me. This was Madison, essentially telling the entire world that she was available and interested while she wore my ring and planned our wedding. Maybe I should just talk to her about it directly, I suggested, though I was already dreading the conversation. Yeah, definitely bring it up, Connor agreed. But Jake, if she doesn't immediately see why that comment was completely inappropriate and wrong, you might have way bigger problems than just one Instagram comment. That observation hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because I knew Connor was probably right. This wasn't really about Tyler_Fitness22, or even about Instagram specifically. This was about whether Madison respected our relationship enough to not actively undermine it for the sake of social media engagement and validation from random strangers. I spent the rest of my workday absolutely dreading the conversation I knew we needed to have. Every time I imagined bringing it up, I could already picture her getting defensive and turning it around on me somehow. But I also knew that if I didn't address this directly, it would eat me alive and poison our relationship anyway. The next day, I got home from work around 6 p.m. to find Madison already there, going through her usual evening routine. She was setting up her ring light in our living room, arranging her camera equipment, and preparing for whatever content she planned to create that evening. When she was finally done with her elaborate setup process, I suggested we make dinner together, hoping to create a relaxed atmosphere for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. Madison was in a particularly good mood that evening, chatting excitedly about how some skincare brand might want to do a longer-term partnership with her if her recent post performed well enough. Her enthusiasm about potential brand deals gave me what seemed like the perfect opening to bring up the comment situation. We were standing in the kitchen together, and I was trying to work up the courage to start the conversation when Madison mentioned something about needing to post more engaging content to boost her algorithm performance and reach new potential followers. Speaking of engaging content, I said, trying my best to keep my tone as casual and non-confrontational as possible. I saw that comment you replied to the other night. The guy who asked if you were taken. Madison didn't even look up from the cutting board where she was chopping vegetables. Which one? I get those types of comments constantly, she said with complete indifference. You told him you were keeping your options open, I continued, feeling my heart rate start to increase. She paused her chopping for just a moment and glanced at me with this annoyed expression, like I was bothering her with something trivial. Oh, that comment. Yeah, what about it? What about it? I repeated, unable to hide my disbelief. We're engaged, Madison. Why would you tell some random guy that you're keeping your options open? She actually rolled her eyes at me before responding. So? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a joke. It's not like I'm actually going to hook up with the guy. A joke? How exactly is telling another man you're available supposed to be funny? I asked, genuinely trying to understand her logic. God, you're so literal about everything, she said with obvious irritation. It's just a comment on social media. Who cares what I say to some random person online? That's when I realized with complete clarity that Madison genuinely didn't see any problem with what she had done. In her mind, there was nothing wrong with encouraging other men to pursue her while she was wearing my engagement ring. I care, I said firmly. You're wearing my ring while telling other men you're available for them to pursue. And so what if I am? She shot back. It's not real, Jake. None of this online stuff is real. You need to stop being so dramatic about everything. I stood there in complete shock. The woman I was planning to marry had just told me that encouraging other men to hit on her was no big deal because it wasn't real. Like our actual relationship was somehow less important than her social media persona. I'm trying to understand why my fiancé thinks it's okay to flirt with other men, I said, making one last attempt to have a rational conversation about this. That's when Madison completely lost it. She slammed the knife down on the cutting board so hard that I jumped. This is exactly what I have to deal with every single day, she said, her voice rising. You getting jealous and possessive over absolutely nothing. It's honestly pathetic. The word pathetic hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The conversation went completely downhill from there. Instead of acknowledging that her comment might have been inappropriate or hurtful, Madison turned the entire situation around on me. She accused me of trying to control her career and called me insecure and controlling for having completely reasonable expectations about boundaries in our relationship. When I pointed out that she never actually mentions being engaged in her posts unless it's part of sponsored content with wedding vendors, she got even nastier with me. You know what your problem is? She said, pointing the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables directly at me. You're jealous that I have ambitions beyond this little bubble we live in. You can't handle that I'm building something bigger than just being your housewife. This isn't about your ambitions, Madison, I tried to explain. This is about basic respect in our relationship. No, this is about you being a controlling, insecure man-child who can't handle his fiancé being successful, she snapped back. You want me to give up everything I've worked for just so you can feel better about yourself. There they were. All the insults lined up like bullets. Man-child, pathetic, insecure, controlling. Every word felt like a slap across the face. I stood there for a full minute, just looking at her, trying to figure out when exactly the woman I had fallen in love with had turned into this person who thought so little of me. When had I become the enemy instead of her partner? When had supporting her career somehow transformed into me being an obstacle to her success? I'm going for a walk, I said finally, realizing that continuing this conversation would only lead to more hurtful words being thrown around. Good, Madison replied without missing a beat. Maybe while you're out there, you can think about whether you want to be with someone who has actual goals in life, or if you'd rather find some girl who will be content to sit around watching TV with you forever. I grabbed my jacket and left our apartment, spending the next 2 hours walking around our neighborhood, just trying to process what had happened. Madison hadn't apologized for her comment, or acknowledged that maybe it was inappropriate to tell other men she was available while wearing my engagement ring. Instead, she had attacked my character, called me names, and made it crystal clear that she thought I was actively holding her back from achieving her dreams of Instagram fame. When I finally returned home, Madison was already in bed, scrolling through her phone like absolutely nothing had happened. She didn't even look up when I walked into the bedroom. That's when I knew with complete certainty that this relationship was probably over. The woman I wanted to marry had just shown me exactly what she thought of me and our engagement. In her mind, I was nothing more than an obstacle to her social media career, a jealous, pathetic man-child who couldn't handle her success. Well, if that's how she really felt about me and our relationship, maybe it was time to stop being an obstacle altogether. The next couple of days after our fight were incredibly weird. Madison acted like absolutely nothing had happened between us. She continued with her normal morning routine, still set up her ring light in our living room every day, still filmed her content like calling me pathetic, and a man-child was just typical Tuesday night conversation for her. I started wondering if she even remembered what she had said to me, but I remembered every single word. The way she had laughed when I told her I was hurt by her comment was burned into my brain. How she had called me controlling for asking for what I thought was basic respect in a relationship. The disgusted look on her face when she called me pathetic, like she genuinely meant every word of it. I kept replaying our conversation over and over in my head, and each time I realized how completely messed up her responses had been. Any normal person in a healthy relationship would have apologized when their partner expressed hurt feelings. Maybe they would have explained what they meant by their comment or tried to reassure their partner that it didn't mean what it seemed to mean. Madison had done the exact opposite of all of that. She had doubled down on her behavior and attacked me for even bringing up my concerns. Then on Wednesday, Madison announced that she was going on a work trip. It was some 3-day influencer retreat at this fancy cabin upstate that a candle company was sponsoring. They were flying out about 20 lifestyle creators to make content about finding inner peace or whatever nonsense they were trying to sell. "It's going to be absolutely amazing for my brand," she said excitedly, while packing her ring light and approximately 15 different outfits for what was supposed to be a 3-day trip. "These girls have way bigger followings than me, so if I can get on their radar and maybe collaborate with them, it could really boost my numbers." She was more excited about this influencer retreat than she had been about anything wedding-related in months. Madison spent over 2 hours laying out different clothes and practicing various poses in our bedroom mirror, making sure she had the perfect content planned for every moment of the trip. I helped her carry her bags to the car Friday morning, and I'm not exaggerating when I say she had more luggage for 3 days than most people take on week-long vacations. "Have fun," I said when she kissed me goodbye. "Don't work too hard." "Oh, please, this isn't work," she laughed. "This is networking disguised as a vacation. The content practically creates itself when you're surrounded by other creators." As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I went back inside and sat at our kitchen table. I had 3 full days alone to think without Madison's constant presence, without her ring light setup dominating our living room, and without the sound of her recording the same sentence 15 times to get the perfect take for her videos. For the first time in months, our apartment was completely quiet. I made myself some coffee and really started thinking deeply about everything that had happened over the past few days. Not just the Instagram comment that had started this whole mess, but the broader pattern of behavior it represented. How Madison would regularly get flirty comments from guys and never shut them down or mention that she was in a committed relationship. How she would act like I was being completely unreasonable anytime I brought up something that bothered me about her online behavior. I thought about our kitchen conversation and how quickly Madison had turned the entire situation around on me instead of addressing my actual concerns. How she had made me feel crazy for wanting my fiancé to not tell other men she was available. How she had called me names and attacked my character instead of having an honest discussion about what I was actually saying. I started thinking about our whole relationship through a completely different lens. How I had been funding this expensive wedding while Madison spent her inconsistent income on camera equipment and clothes for her content creation. How she had moved in with me when her lease was up because she was broke, but had somehow made it seem like she was doing me a favor. How every conversation about our future together somehow became about her brand, her goals, her growth, and her social media success. When exactly had I become just a supporting character in Madison's carefully curated Instagram story? When had my role in our relationship been reduced to funding her lifestyle while she told other men she was keeping her options open? Saturday morning, I did something I never do. I called in sick to work. I told my crew I had food poisoning and needed the day off, which was completely out of character for me. Then I spent the entire morning browsing apartments online, just looking at what was available in my price range. At first, I was just browsing casually, seeing what was out there, but then I started getting serious about it. I found this decent one-bedroom place about 20 minutes away from where Madison and I lived. Nothing fancy or luxurious, but it was available immediately, and I could easily afford it without having to rely on Madison's inconsistent influencer income. The landlord was willing to do a virtual showing since I explained that I worked construction and couldn't get there during normal business hours. By Saturday afternoon, I had filled out a complete rental application. By Sunday morning, it was approved and ready for me to move in. I also started thinking seriously about our wedding and how much money I had already put down for everything. The venue deposit, Madison's ridiculously expensive dress, the catering, the photographer. We were talking about thousands of dollars for a wedding to someone who thought I was pathetic for wanting basic respect in our relationship. Sunday afternoon, while Madison was probably taking staged photos of herself holding candles in some scenic mountain location, I made a comprehensive list of every vendor we had hired for the wedding. I started looking up their cancellation policies to see what my options were. Most of them were actually pretty reasonable since we were still 6 months away from the actual wedding date. I wasn't quite ready to pull the trigger on canceling everything yet, but I wanted to know exactly what it would cost me to walk away from this relationship versus what it would cost me emotionally and financially to marry someone who clearly saw our relationship as an obstacle to her social media success. By Sunday evening, I had pretty much made up my mind about what I needed to do. The 3 days alone had given me a clarity that I hadn't had when Madison was around constantly with her demands for attention and her daily drama. When you're not dealing with someone's constant need for validation and content creation, you can actually think clearly about whether you want to spend the rest of your life with that person. The answer was becoming pretty obvious to me. I spent Sunday night going through our shared belongings, figuring out what was actually mine versus what belonged to Madison. Most of the furniture was stuff she had bought, or items we had picked out together that I didn't really care about keeping. But my tools, clothes, books, and electronics were clearly mine, and I could pack all of that up and be out of there in just a few hours if I decided to go through with leaving. Monday morning, Madison texted me a selfie from the influencer retreat with some message about how the mountain air was giving her such incredible clarity about her goals and her future direction. The irony wasn't lost on me. We were both getting clarity from this time apart, just not the kind she was expecting. I texted back, "Looks beautiful, have fun," and went to work as usual. I spent the day framing out a deck edition in Riverview, working with my hands and thinking through everything one more time. By the time I got home Monday evening, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Madison had shown me exactly who she was and what she thought of me during our kitchen fight. It was time for me to stop pretending otherwise and accept reality. She was supposed to be back Tuesday evening, which gave me one more day to get everything sorted out and make my decision final. It was time to give Madison all the options she claimed she wanted to keep open. I woke up around 6 a.m. Tuesday morning even though I hadn't set an alarm. I couldn't sleep anyway, knowing what I was about to do. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table one last time, looking around the apartment we had shared for over a year. It's weird how different a place feels when you know you're never coming back to it. The first thing I did was call the wedding venue. I had their number saved in my phone from when we had originally booked it months earlier. The coordinator, Jennifer, answered on the second ring, and I got straight to the point. "Hi, Jennifer. This is Jake Miller. We have the December 14th booking, and I need to cancel the entire event." She immediately went into this whole spiel about how December was their busiest season and how cancellations this late in the process usually result in forfeiting the entire deposit. I told her I understood the financial implications, but we needed to cancel everything anyway. It turned out that since we were still 6 months away from the actual wedding date, we would only lose about 20% of what we had already paid them. I could definitely live with that loss. "Is everything okay? Would you prefer to reschedule for a different date instead?" Jennifer asked, clearly trying to salvage the booking. "No, we need to cancel completely. The wedding is off," I said firmly. She got quiet for a moment before responding. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'll process the cancellation today and get you the refund paperwork." One vendor down, several more to go. Next was the caterer, and that conversation went surprisingly smoothly. Very professional, no unnecessary drama, and I got most of our money back without any hassle. The photographer that Madison had specifically pushed for because her aesthetic matched my brand was surprisingly cool about the whole situation. She even wished me well and said she hoped everything worked out for the best. The DJ and florist were equally easy to deal with. By 10 a.m., I had systematically contacted every single vendor we had hired for our wedding. It was just a string of calm, professional phone calls where I politely informed them that the wedding was off and we needed to cancel all services. A few of the vendors asked if we wanted to reschedule for a later date, but I made it crystal clear that we were completely done. This wasn't a temporary postponement. This was a permanent cancellation. The hardest call was to the bridal shop where Madison had ordered her dress. That thing had cost almost $3,000, and she had been obsessing over every single detail for months. The alterations hadn't started yet since the wedding was still 6 months away, so they agreed to cancel the order and refund most of the deposit. "Should we ship the dress to you if it arrives before we can stop the order?" the woman at the bridal shop asked. "No, just send it back to the designer," I replied. "We won't be needing it." By noon, I had systematically dismantled our entire wedding. Every vendor, every deposit, every carefully planned detail that Madison had spent months organizing. I managed to get back about 70% of the money we had put down, which was way better than I had expected. The remaining 30% was basically a stupidity tax for getting engaged to someone who thought I was pathetic for wanting respect in our relationship. Then I started handling the apartment situation. I called the electric company and had my name removed from the account. I did the same thing with the cable and internet services. I contacted our landlord and took my name off the lease entirely. Madison could figure out how to afford the place on her own with her inconsistent influencer income, or she could find somewhere cheaper to live. Around 1 p.m., I started the actual packing process. There really wasn't much that was specifically mine. Most of the furniture belonged to Madison, or consisted of things we had bought together that I didn't particularly care about keeping. My clothes, tools, books, electronics, and some kitchen stuff that my mom had given me when I first moved out years ago. All of that fit into boxes and garbage bags pretty easily. The hardest part emotionally was packing up my tools. I've been collecting them for over 10 years, and I know every wrench, pipe cutter, and piece of equipment like old friends. Some of them were gifts from my dad when I first started working in plumbing. Loading them into my truck felt like I was closing a significant chapter of my life, but it also felt strangely liberating. 2 hours later, my truck was completely loaded and I was ready to leave. But first, I had to handle the logistics of my new apartment. I drove over to sign the lease and pick up the keys. The place was smaller than what Madison and I had shared, but it was entirely mine. No ring lights cluttering up the living room, no camera equipment taking over every surface, and no constant chatter about engagement rates and brand partnerships. I unloaded all my belongings into the new place without bothering to arrange anything properly. I just got everything inside and off the truck. I'd have plenty of time to set up my new home later, but right now, I just wanted to get moved out before Madison returned. Around 5 p.m., I drove back to our old apartment one final time. Madison wouldn't be back for a couple of hours, but I wanted to do a thorough walkthrough to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Walking through those rooms was surreal. The living room where Madison filmed most of her content looked significantly bigger without my belongings in it. Our bedroom felt empty with just her clothes hanging in the closet. The kitchen where we'd had our fight 3 days earlier looked like a stage set waiting for actors to arrive. Before I left for good, I wrote a simple note and kept it short and to the point. "Since you're keeping your options open, I'm giving you one. It's all yours." I left it on the kitchen counter where she would definitely see it, right next to the spot where we'd had our argument about the Instagram comment. Then I walked out of that apartment and locked the door behind me for the last time. I drove straight to my new place without looking back once. I spent the evening setting up my bed and unpacking the essentials I'd need immediately. I ordered pizza and sat on my floor eating it while scrolling through my phone. It felt weird being alone after 2 years of constant background noise from Madison's content creation, but it was a good kind of weird. Peaceful. Quiet. For the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. Around 8 p.m., my phone started buzzing with incoming calls. Madison was back from her influencer retreat and had discovered what had happened. I turned my phone to silent and kept eating my pizza, letting her figure out the situation on her own first. By 9 p.m., she had called 12 times. I could see the notifications piling up on my screen, but I didn't check any of them. I wanted to let her process what had happened and come to her own conclusions before I had to deal with her reaction. An hour later, the text messages started pouring in. First confused, then panicked, then increasingly angry. I read a few of them just to gauge her reaction. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Is everything okay? Jake, where are you? Where's all your stuff? I found your note. This is insane. You can't just disappear over one stupid comment. I turned my phone completely off and went to bed. Tomorrow was definitely going to be interesting, but tonight I was sleeping in my own place, making my own decisions, and not having to worry about being called controlling or insecure for having completely normal relationship expectations. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Madison had wanted to keep her options open, and now she had every single option in the world available to her. I turned my phone back on the next morning around 8 a.m., and it immediately started buzzing like crazy with missed notifications. Overnight, Madison had called me 47 times. 47. I couldn't believe someone could be that persistent, but apparently discovering that your fiancé had completely disappeared brings out that level of desperation. The voicemails were absolutely wild. They took me on a complete emotional journey from start to finish. The first few started out apologetic and concerned, then quickly escalated to desperate pleading, and finally transformed into pure nastiness. The final voicemail was particularly charming. Fine, if you want to throw away 2 years over this, that's your problem. My sister thinks you've completely lost your mind. This is absolutely psychotic behavior. That last comment made me laugh out loud. According to Madison, I was psychotic for not wanting my fiancé to flirt with other men online and tell them she was available. Sure, Madison, that makes perfect sense. The text messages were even more entertaining than the voicemails. Madison had apparently spent most of Tuesday night trying to figure out what had happened to me and where all my stuff had gone. Then Wednesday morning, she started calling all our wedding vendors to see if any of them had heard from me. That's exactly how she discovered that I had canceled our entire wedding. You canceled our wedding without even talking to me, one text read. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? I have to explain to everyone why my fiancé just disappeared without any explanation. You're going to pay for this. I'm keeping the engagement ring and you owe me for emotional damages. Classic Madison behavior. Everything was about how my decisions affected her image and her feelings. Not once in any of her messages did she acknowledge why I might be upset about her behavior in the first place. There was no recognition that telling other men she was keeping her options open might have been inappropriate or hurtful. I didn't respond to any of her messages. Instead, I went to work and focused on the Riverview deck project I'd been working on. When I came home to my quiet apartment that evening, I felt like I could actually breathe freely for the first time in months. Thursday brought a new wave of drama as the calls started coming from other people in our lives. Madison's sister Chelsea texted me asking if I was okay and whether I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. My mom called because Madison had apparently reached out to her, claiming she was deeply concerned about my mental health. Jake, honey, Madison says you just vanished without any explanation, my mom said when I answered her call. She's very concerned about you and thinks something might be seriously wrong. I'm fine, Mom. I just needed some space from the relationship, I explained, trying to keep things simple. Space, sweetheart? You were planning a wedding together. People don't just take space 6 months before their wedding, she replied, clearly confused and worried. I kept the conversation vague with my mom because I didn't want to get into the whole complicated story over the phone. But I made it crystal clear that I was safe. This was entirely my decision, and I was handling things the way I needed to handle them. She wasn't happy about the situation, but she agreed to stay out of it and let me work through whatever was going on. The worst call came Friday morning when my buddy Connor reached out. Bro, Madison showed up at my workplace yesterday asking if I knew where you were, he said. She was crying and saying you'd had some kind of mental breakdown and just disappeared. That really pissed me off. Madison was going around to mutual friends and family members, telling them I was mentally unstable, all because I had finally stood up for myself and refused to accept her disrespectful behavior. What did you tell her? I asked Connor. I told her that if you wanted to talk to her, you'd call her yourself, he replied. But man, she seemed really upset about everything. Are you sure you're handling this the right way? Even Connor, who had been the one telling me Madison's behavior was completely messed up in the first place, was starting to question my methods. It sucked to realize that Madison's victim narrative was actually working on people who should have known better. Meanwhile, Madison was posting cryptic Instagram stories about being blindsided by someone's true colors and sharing inspirational quotes about, when people show you who they really are, believe them. Her followers were eating it up, offering endless support and asking who had hurt their beloved influencer queen. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison was getting more engagement from our breakup than she had gotten from our entire relationship or engagement. She was literally building her brand off of painting me as the villain who had wronged her. Saturday morning, I was at my new apartment trying to set up some furniture when someone started pounding on my door. It was loud, aggressive knocking that went on for about 30 seconds straight. I looked through the peephole and saw Madison standing there. Somehow she had managed to track down my new address. She probably got it from Connor, or maybe she figured it out from the lease transfer paperwork. Either way, she had found me. Madison looked absolutely rough. No makeup, hair thrown up in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and one of my old hoodies that she had apparently kept. This was definitely not the polished Instagram version of Madison. This was desperate, real-life Madison who was falling apart. I almost didn't answer the door, but I figured I'd have to deal with this confrontation eventually. It might as well be now, and I could get it over with once and for all. "We need to talk," she said the instant I opened the door. "Do we?" I replied. "Yes, we absolutely do. This whole situation is insane, Jake. You can't just disappear and cancel our entire life together because of one stupid comment." Without being invited, Madison pushed past me into my apartment and started looking around at my boxes and minimal furniture setup. "So this is it? This is what you chose over our relationship? Some sad bachelor pad because you couldn't handle me having a career? This is what I chose over being with someone who thinks I'm pathetic for wanting basic respect," I said firmly. That comment stopped her in her tracks for a moment. She sat down heavily on my couch, which was basically the only real piece of furniture I'd managed to set up so far. "I didn't mean that," she said, and for the first time her voice sounded genuinely remorseful. "I was just angry because I felt like you were attacking my work and my career." "I wasn't attacking your work, Madison. I was asking for basic respect in our relationship." "And I said I was sorry about the comment," she continued. "But instead of talking to me like an adult about your concerns, you burned our entire relationship down and humiliated me in front of everyone we know. Do you have any idea what you've put me through this week?" Here we go again. Everything was about what I had put her through, not about the behavior that had started this whole mess in the first place. "You called me pathetic for caring that you told another man you were keeping your options open," I said, looking directly at her. "What exactly did you expect me to do with that information?" "I expected you to act like a grown man instead of running away like a child," Madison shot back. And there it was again. The complete audacity and lack of self-awareness that had gotten us into this mess in the first place. She was sitting in my apartment, calling me a child for leaving a relationship where she had made it crystal clear that she didn't respect me or value our commitment. The sheer nerve of it was almost impressive. That's when the tears started flowing. Not the pretty single-tear thing you see in movies, but full-on ugly sobbing that shook her entire body. "I love you, Jake. I want to marry you," she said between gasps. That comment didn't mean anything at all. I was just trying to grow my following and get more engagement. "I'll completely change my social media strategy if that's what you want from me." "It's not about your social media strategy, Madison. It's about who you are as a person and how you treat people you're supposed to care about." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, looking genuinely confused. "It means that when I tried to have an honest conversation about something that hurt me, you laughed at me and called me names. That's who you are, Madison. Someone who thinks my feelings are inconvenient obstacles to your personal goals." Madison stayed in my apartment for another hour, cycling between tears, anger, and desperate promises to change everything about herself. She kept saying she would delete Instagram entirely if that's what it took to save our relationship, which just showed me that she still didn't understand the real problem. Finally, I told her she needed to leave. She begged for another chance, said we could go to couples therapy together, promised she would do absolutely anything to fix the situation between us. "The time to fix this was when I brought up my concerns in our kitchen," I said firmly. "You chose to call me pathetic instead of having a mature conversation about boundaries. That was your chance, and you blew it. That was a week ago, and I haven't seen Madison since then. She's emailed me twice since our confrontation at my apartment. Long, rambling messages about how she's learned so much about herself and our relationship through this whole experience. I read the first email out of curiosity, but I deleted the second one without even opening it. I've heard everything Madison has to say, and none of it changes the fundamental issues between us. Haven't heard anything from her since those emails, which is probably for the best. Her Instagram has transformed into this whole healing journey narrative, with posts about recognizing toxic relationships and identifying red flags in romantic partners. Her followers are absolutely loving this new content direction, offering endless support and validation. She's probably gained more followers and engagement from our breakup than our entire relationship ever generated for her brand. The irony isn't lost on me that she's building her social media presence off of painting me as the toxic partner, while conveniently leaving out the part where she told other men she was available while wearing my engagement ring. But honestly, I'm completely fine with Madison telling whatever story she needs to tell. Let her followers believe whatever version of events makes them feel better. I know the truth, and more importantly, I know I made the right choice for my own well-being and self-respect. So it's been about 3 weeks since Madison showed up at my apartment doing her whole desperate crying routine. I figured that dramatic confrontation was the end of it, that she'd finally get the message that I wasn't coming back, and she'd move on with her life and her influencer career. I was completely wrong about that. Yesterday, around 6 p.m., I was cleaning up after work when my phone rang. It was a local number that I didn't recognize, but I figured it might be a potential client calling about a plumbing job, so I answered it. "Hello? Jake, this is David, Madison's father," came the voice on the other end. My stomach immediately dropped. I had met Madison's parents maybe 4 times during our entire 2-year relationship. They lived about 2 hours away and weren't really involved in our day-to-day life. "We need to talk," David continued in a formal, serious tone that made it clear this wasn't a casual social call. "Patricia and I would like to meet with you tomorrow if that's possible." The way he said it, so formal and businesslike, made it obvious that this wasn't really a request. This was Madison's parents demanding a meeting to discuss what had happened between their daughter and me. After some back-and-forth negotiation about how this was all supposedly just a misunderstanding that could be worked out with some mature conversation, I reluctantly agreed to meet them for coffee. 1 hour maximum, and then I was done with this whole situation. This morning, I showed up at this diner that was halfway between our respective towns. David and Patricia were already there, sitting in a corner booth and looking like they were attending a funeral rather than having coffee. David's a big, intimidating guy who works in insurance, while Patricia's a school teacher who's always been sweet to me, but can be pretty intense when she wants to be. After we ordered coffee, Patricia immediately jumped into her prepared speech. Madison was completely devastated by what had happened, barely eating, and couldn't understand what she had possibly done wrong to deserve this treatment. According to her parents, they wanted to know what had happened between us and why I had disappeared without any explanation. It quickly became obvious that Madison had conveniently left out some major details when she told her parents her version of events. She had made it sound like this was just a misunderstanding about her work, and that I had disappeared without any explanation or attempt to work things out. So I explained everything to them. The Instagram comment where Madison told another guy she was keeping her options open. Our kitchen fight where she dismissed my concerns and called me pathetic and controlling. How she had made it clear that she thought my feelings were obstacles to her social media success. I watched their expressions change as I told them the real story. "She really said that to another man online?" Patricia asked quietly, looking genuinely shocked. David tried to defend Madison's career and how hard she had worked to build her following, but I pointed out that her career apparently required telling other men she was available while wearing my engagement ring and planning our wedding. They kept pushing for me to give Madison another chance. Couples counseling, taking a break from social media, whatever it would take to salvage the relationship. I explained that this wasn't about social media or career issues. This was about basic respect, and Madison had shown me exactly what she thought of me in our relationship. "Marriage is about forgiveness," Patricia said, getting emotional. "People make mistakes, and you work through them together." "This wasn't a mistake," I replied firmly. "This was Madison showing me who she really is and what she thinks of me." After 20 more minutes of them pushing and me explaining why I was done with their daughter, David got visibly frustrated with my unwillingness to bend. "So that's it? You're going to throw away 2 years because your pride got hurt?" he said, his voice rising. "Your daughter told another man she was keeping her options open while planning our wedding, then called me pathetic when I asked about it. But sure, this is about my wounded pride." Patricia started crying about Madison being their only daughter and how much this was hurting her. That's when David really lost his temper with me. "Maybe Madison's better off without you," he said angrily. "Walking away instead of fighting for your relationship shows exactly what kind of man you really are." I stood up and pulled out my wallet to pay for my coffee. "You're absolutely right. I'm the kind of man who won't stay with someone who doesn't respect him." I left a $20 bill on the table and walked out of that diner without looking back. I got a text from Patricia an hour later. "We're sorry this conversation got so heated. We just love our daughter and want what's best for her." I didn't respond to her message. This whole meeting confirmed what I already knew. Madison had been playing the victim to everyone who would listen, making it sound like I had vanished over nothing. Her parents had no idea about her actual behavior because she had painted herself as the confused girlfriend whose crazy fiancé disappeared without explanation. But honestly, I'm glad this meeting happened. Now I know for sure that there's absolutely no going back. Madison's not going to change. Her family thinks I'm the problem, and everyone's bought into her narrative about being the wronged party. That's perfectly fine with me. Let them all think whatever they want to think. I know the truth, and that's enough. Madison is still out there telling everyone who will listen that she's keeping her options open, and now she actually can.